Man, I have some mixed opinions today, guys, because I just finished watching an awesome episode of Dragon Ball Super, followed by a very boring night of the NBA dunk contest. But without wasting any more time, let's get straight into this episode 79 review of Dragon Ball Super. And boy, oh boy, do we have a lot to talk about today. So, the first thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is the theme, and one of the things that this episode was showing is how difficult of a creature Majin Buu is to actually face. And this is really cool because as Dragon Ball fans, we've seen Majin Buu fight against our heroes, many years ago. And now the tide has kind of shifted where Majin Buu is fighting for us against other opponents. And we're actually getting a chance to see what these villains or fighters from another universe have to deal with when they face up against the guy that we've already managed to defeat. And it was a very cool thing to see Majin Buu, using all of his absorption techniques and fighting for his own childish, mannerish ways on our side. And, to talk more about the actual Universe 9 team, they're referred to as the Trio of Dangers, which I think is a pretty cool name because it's like 3 of them and then they're all like a dangerous gang. And they kind of have like a very Western-esque theme towards themselves. You kind of get a feeling like they're kind of one of those, they're kind of like these anthropomorphic humanoid wolves from another universe that kind of look like Diablos in a sense. And as the fight starts off with Majin Buu and Basil, Buu's getting his butt kicked, like he's losing, but once he starts fighting back, you start to see that wow, Buu's been toying with this guy the whole time and he's literally just having fun like a helpless child. And this episode did a phenomenal job in switching back and forth between dialogue and action sequences. I think this was probably one of the best paced action sequences in Dragon Ball Super so far, as we see so much dialogue that actually tells us so much. As Goku was talking about how these guys from Universe 9 are, not really, showing off their ki as opposed to the other villains that Goku's fought throughout the series. And that's actually going to be really cool because when we see all the other guys fighting against these different characters from these different universes, they're so used to this mastered form of locking onto their opponent, chasing them, sensing their ki to fight. It's going to kind of change the shift and balance of how their techniques go. But one interesting dynamic that I felt needs to be mentioned in all of this is that as Buu is fighting against Basil and he's starting to get the edge, we see that Goku is excited throughout the fight, and we see Basil using all of these techniques like the Shining Blaster. We see him using another technique called the Bullet Shoot. And in all of this stuff, Majin Buu is just absorbing it, and you see Goku's like a little kid being so excited by all of this, along with obviously Zeno, both, or shall I say the Zenos. And we see Beerus pissed at all of this. He's like, you're sitting here celebrating this fight when in fact you're endangering not only my universe, but all of these other multiverses because you wanted this tournament so bad. And it really goes to show you that Goku is very selfish in this sense, because he is excited by this tournament when in fact he's putting so many people in danger. And as the fight continues, Basil starts to show off more of his power, and as he shoots this really powerful, bullet shoot attack that actually damages Mr. Satan, we see that Majin Buu turns back into that childish, character where he kind of gets mad and where he, fires off all of that smoking steam and he starts to fight Basil and he starts kicking his ass. And Basil is losing really bad. And Buu, forces Basil to shoot this large blast out of rage, and Buu reflects it, and we see like the fighter from Universe 11 stop the attack in all of his cloaked armor, or robes I should say. And that was a really cool scene, how we're seeing how these blasts are going all throughout this area, and unlike the Universe 6 tournament, there's no barrier that's really stopping the energy blast. So if Basil shot off a blast that's just too powerful and it kills somebody, it's kind of like, oh well, nobody really cares. And that kind of added a much more, I guess you could say, a larger feel to this whole fighting atmosphere. So Blue's kicking Basil's ass, and Basil eats this fruit that pretty much heals and powers him up. And the first thing that I thought about here was this reminded me of Turles And it also reminded me of Zarbon at the same time. It reminded me of Turles because of the fruit-like object that he consumed, but it reminded me of Zarbon based off of how his body just literally like quadrupled in size and he became much more monstrous in his appearance. And similar to how we see Zarbon is like a much more lean fighter becoming this big gigantic monster when he was fighting against Vegeta, and I thought that was pretty cool. So he heals himself, which if to Majin Buu's dismay is kind of unfair because Buu can actually heal, but Basil actually heals himself by using an actual object. So it's kind of unfair because Buu's using his natural abilities and Basil's actually using like a third-party object, which is completely, unfair, as, the Supreme Kai Rao gave him. So Beerus starts to argue, and Zeno shows off his childlike nature and the fact that he's kind of starting to get bored by this fight. So they start to go at it, man. Like, they go at it. When Majin Buu starts going at it with Basil in this unlocked form, it becomes the best fighting sequence I've seen in Dragon Ball Super. He uses this technique called the Wolfgang pressure, and Majin Buu, as we would have guessed, completely recovers from it and powers up a Kamehameha and blasts Basil away. He literally powered up the Fat Boy Kamehameha. Majin Buu powered up the Fat Boy Kamehameha, and this is not the first time we've seen him do it because Majin Buu's done the Kamehameha before, but it was just awesome to see him, like, just having such mastery of it, and he just knocks him away, and Basil's out cold. And the cool thing about it is that, like, the drugs kind of expired, so Basil was already beaten from earlier, but he was so, like, coked up on all of these drugs that he's, like, standing on, like, whatever, fumes he has left, and he, like, gets knocked out, and I felt that was awesome. So, after all of this, Majin Buu goes straight over to heal Mr. Satan. He heals him, which, to me, I'm going to talk about more in the interesting details, because I feel like that can actually be used a lot more later on. And we find out that Gohan is going to fight Lavenda next. Awesome episode. This was the best description I can kind of give and share my thoughts on everything I saw, because this was a very visual episode. There wasn't a lot of dialogue. It was more so the fighting techniques that we saw throughout the actual episode itself. But this was definitely some of the best animation and choreography I've seen in Dragon Ball Super so far. And it felt so active and fast and well-paced. It was just amazing how well they executed this episode. And I wish, we would have gotten more episodes like this in previous fights. But, to talk to some interesting things here, I've been seeing a floating rumor on the internet that they're calling this trio of Dangers gang with Bergamo, Lavenda, and Basil to be kind of like Sonic, Knuckles, and Tails from all of those Sonic games. And although I don't think there's enough evidence to suggest it, it is kind of interesting to look at their appearance and base it on that, as Tails, Knuckles, and Sonic are all like these beast-like creatures. But the thing I really wanted to talk to you guys about in this interesting detail is Majin Buu has the ability to heal other people. And it makes me wonder, when this all-out tournament, when it's 10 on 10 pretty much happens, can Majin Buu use that to an advantage? Because if you have a natural ability to heal somebody, then doesn't that kind of give your team an unfair advantage? I don't know. I want to hear your thoughts in that comment section below, guys, because if, let's say, Krillin or 18 or 17 or one of the weaker characters gets hurt, Buu can just heal him, and then when you already have Piccolo who can already heal himself or regenerate, that kind of gives Universe 7 a lot more advantages that I didn't really think about before. So I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on that, guys. But, so one of the other things I also wanted to talk about is the fact that we really got a stronger look into how, I guess you could say, simplistic this tournament is to Zeno, because when Basil originally fell out, we saw that, Zeno was getting bored and he wanted to keep watching the fight. Even though he fell out of the ring and that should have been Majin Buu's win right there, Zeno wanted to be entertained. It kind of makes you wonder that there really are no set in stone rules in this tournament, because it's kind of whatever the hell Zeno wants. Like, Zeno was threatening to destroy Universe 9 just because he felt like it, in case they weren't entertaining enough. And it kind of tells you that this tournament could go in a very, very, very broad direction where whatever the hell Zeno says, or the Zenos say, I keep saying Zeno, I should say Zenos say, kind of goes. And for my key discussion for you guys today, I made a video recently talking about, Majin Buu's fighting potential, and I said that he's very unfair to fight in a tournament setting. And, after watching this episode, I feel like they kind of showed a lot of that, because if Buu was a normal character who couldn't just absorb those hits and come back from it, and he fights a character who is not significantly stronger than him, he can really drag the fight out. Even if you fight against a character who is stronger but not significantly stronger, Buu's ability to heal himself can tire out that opponent, and then he can now take the edge in the fight. Kind of similar to how, Super Saiyan 3 Goku was fighting, very well against Kid Buu, but as the fight dragged on, you started to see him struggle. And that's kind of how it is for Fat Buu. So, really curious to hear your thoughts on his fighting potential, guys. So overall, guys, I felt this was a phenomenal episode. It was awesome. It was just spectacular. Some of the best fight scenes I've seen in Dragon Ball Super. I mean, this is definitely up there with one of the best fighting sequences that we have seen thus far in Dragon Ball Super. Like, hands down, no question about it. And to talk about my predictions for the upcoming episode, as I was mentioning earlier, Gohan, as we see in the preview, is blinded by Lavenda. And Goku has said before that they cannot sense their opponents. So this puts it at a very interesting fighting circumstance where Gohan can't see and he can't sense his opponent. So he literally has to use the other senses in order to defeat, Lavenda. And to tell you guys a little bit about the preview, it says in the preview that Gohan starts to struggle, but, and then ... and it doesn't tell you what happens. So I'm guessing he finds a way to get a trump card, or he loses in some sense. But I'm gonna find this a very cerebral fight, as Gohan's gonna have to use much more of his brain to survive this potential bout against Lavenda. And I think that's going to be a much more entertaining fight, where we see Buu and Basil having a much more conventional, classic Dragon Ball Z kick your ass fight. And then you were going to see Gohan versus Lavenda being more similar to how Kurama in the Yu Yu Hakusho series fights, where he uses his brain and not necessarily his brawn. And I think that's going to be great. And I'm even more stoked to see what's going to happen when Goku fights against Bergamo, who clearly seems to be the leader of this group. So, with everything else said, guys, I really enjoyed this episode. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. This was one of the best Dragon Ball Super episodes I've seen in a while. Not the best, but it's definitely up there, an easy 5 stars, and I want to hear everything you have to say. So, with everything else said, please remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. And remember, as I always say, to have a great day, guys. And for my NBA fans out there, tell me what you think about this dunk contest, because I honestly felt it was boring.